Welcome back to the Move Better Project. It's evening, I got my mug of sleepy time tea, I'm chilling by the fire. We're just going to do a relaxing episode about how to deal with something called de Quervain's Tenosynovitis. Now that's a difficult to remember name that basically means pain here at the base of the thumb. We're going to talk about what this is, go through some of the relevant anatomy, and then go through a basic treatment plan. To do all the exercises that I'm going to show you, you're going to need a lacrosse ball. This is especially important if you have issues with the fingers or thumb on the other hand, because some of the soft tissue releases are just easier to use a lacrosse ball. In terms of grip strength, you're going to need a muscle floss band or voodoo band. This is a really important and irreplaceable tool. If you don't have one, there's a link in the description of this video. You can buy it, and not only that, but I will get a taste of the purchase price, and it's a great way to support the channel. I have this Gua Sha tool, and Gua Sha is a technique of doing a very gentle scraping on the surface to increase blood flow and improve soft tissue mobility. If you don't have one of these, you can use just a regular butter knife or a spoon. Please be careful. Don't be the person who cuts themselves with a butter knife trying to do a little Gua Sha. That's what you're gonna need. Without further ado, let's get into it. What is de Quervain's Tenosynovitis? Well, it's inflammation of two tendons that appear here at the base of the thumb, where the thumb and its metacarpal, this first metacarpal bone, meet with the wrist bones. Now, there is a group of tendons here that form something, hopefully you can see mine, called the anatomical snuff box. This was apparently the perfect amount of very finely ground tobacco to do a little midday perk, I guess, back in the day. But if you can zoom in on this, we'll see there's sort of two sides of that triangle. There's this tendon here on the inside, and then there's these, it's actually two tendons here on the outside. So it's these two tendons on the outside that are really the issue. And there are two muscles. One is called extensor pollicis brevis. It goes from the distal 1/3 of the radius. So you have two forearm bones. The radius is on the inside. The ulna is on the outside if you're looking at the back, vice versa. Ulna, radius if you're looking at the front. Extensor pollicis brevis goes from the distal 1/3 of the posterior radius to the first or proximal phalanx of the first digit. So this last, anything that happens beyond that second knuckle of the thumb, not really going to be important for this. It's that proximal phalanx that matters. Then there's abductor pollicis longus. That's going to start on the proximal half of the radius, again, posterior side, and come down and attach onto the first metacarpal. So that's this bone here that connects into the actual carpal bones of the wrist, and that has a whole funky joint that we don't even need to get into. It's shaped like a saddle, so it's kind of convex one way and concave the other. Just a fun fact. So those two muscles, extensor pollicis brevis and abductor pollicis longus, they do slightly different things, but they combine to sort of have this extension and abduction of the thumb, which basically means going from across the palm to all the way opened up. And that movement resisted is particularly going to be painful. So what you see a lot is these people have pain with lifting up their baby. In fact, I have a movement coaching client right now who's going through that. And that radial deviation, or moving the wrist the direction of the thumb, is going to activate those muscles, and then also keeping the thumb in an extended position and actively extending that is also going to inflame those tendons if those muscles are really tight and they're dysfunctional and the range of motion isn't there. So what we're looking for in terms of things to examine or just to take stock of before and after we do any treatment is, all right, what's the range of motion passively of these structures? So can I close down the thumb by, this is called opposing the thumb, basically bringing it across my palm, and then can I continue to move that direction? The test for de Quervain's Tenosynovitis is called Finkelstein's test, and basically you put the thumb inside a fist and then deviate ulnarly, so tilt your wrist towards the pinky. That test will provoke a very sharp pain in someone with DQT. Even if you don't have the official diagnosis of DQT though, what you'll notice is that it feels really tight. A lot of people have tension and maybe even a little bit of pain or sort of just below pain, discomfort in that area when we do that test. So that's one thing. What we also want to look at is just pure ulnar deviation. Is there a big difference side to side with that? There probably will be. Also wrist flexion, and there probably will be, again, some kind of a difference side to side. Also, we can look at testing before and after strength and pain solicitation with contraction of those muscles actively. This is sort of the passive insufficiency of a dysfunctional muscle to lengthen it all the way. Then there's the active insufficiency of a muscle of sort of contracting it through a full range of motion. So I can test this with an eccentric contraction. I can grab on to this proximal phalanx of the thumb and bring that across, resist myself, but bring that across. That will probably provoke some pain, or you'll just be weak one side compared to the other with that. And then I can also grab onto the first metacarpal and again, just kind of resist keeping that out. And again, what's my strength? What's my pain tolerance? How much can I do with zero pain? So if you find a big difference side to side, or maybe this is even something where you're having bilateral symptoms, then we just want to do those range of motion and strength tests, not to provoke pain or really find it, but just to see, okay, what can I do without pain? Then we do our treatment and we want to improve the pain-free range of motion. Once you've improved the range of motion, then we're going to want to load the tissue progressively with eccentric loading, so sort of fighting yourself and losing until the strength of that tendon and the strength and resiliency of those muscles is good and we have no dysfunction with opening and closing the hand on both sides. So let's talk treatment. First, we want to do a tack and stretch of these two muscles to increase the range of motion. So again, I can do Finkelstein's test or test, whatever I want to look at first to see, okay, how much is my range of motion? And then I'm going to take a lacrosse ball. Now you can use your thumb of your opposite hand, but if you're somebody with thumb issues on one side, we don't really want to test how much pressure you can apply with your thumb. And if you're dealing with this bilaterally, obviously that's not going to work. We can use fingers if you need to, but I like a lacrosse ball. Especially if your lacrosse ball, mine's old and it's gotten a little bit smooth, but if your lacrosse ball has a little bit of tack to it, that's great because it's going to allow you to wind up and create some tension here. So let's start with extensor pollicis brevis. That's going to be in the proximal 1/3 of the radius, and I can just hunt around in here with fingers and just doing this opening and closing or extending and flexing the thumb. I can find, all right, where's the muscle that's contracting when I do that? It's right about there. For me, you can see that my fingers move when I contract that muscle, okay? So I'm gonna take my lacrosse ball. I wanna apply pressure downward, sort of towards the radius bone, through that muscle, and then I can twist and take up a little bit of slack in that system, okay? And then I'm just going to bring my thumb out and my wrist a little bit radially deviated, breathe in, and then I'm going to breathe out and just sort of going into whatever version of that Finkelstein's test that you can tolerate. And again, it might be like this for you at first, just doing very small movements, that's fine. Wherever you're at is fine. We just want to use the breath, contract, apply pressure, maintain the pressure, exhale, relax and stretch that muscle. And just using that, hunting around in here, and you're gonna feel, okay, that feels really tender, that feels really stiff, that feels like a trigger point, whatever. These sort of really tender, messed up areas in that muscle, and we just, whatever pressure you can tolerate, push down, wind it up, breathe in, contract, breathe out, relax. And we're gonna get that muscle to relax and become less sensitive, less painful over time. I'm just gonna keep working on that, and I can spend as long as you want. I would say no more than 5 minutes on that distal part. And again, that might be way too much at first. Just whatever feels like, okay, I've put a little work in there, it's feeling a little better, but I'm kind of starting to get sick of it. So that's number one. Number two, same thing, just a little bit higher up here. And I'm gonna follow the lateral surface of the radius up here until I kind of find a stiff muscle. And then if I bring my thumb back and forth, I will feel a muscle sliding between my fingers in the bone, and it's right about there for me. You can see my forearm kind of puts pressure through my fingers as I move that back and forth. Now I want to focus on really just moving the metacarpal bone, because that's where that abductor pollicis longus muscle inserts into. So again, just gonna find a little spot in here with the ball, and then radial deviate, extend a little bit, pull the thumb outward, abducting it, and then breathe out, flex, ulnar deviate, bring that thumb across or oppose that first metacarpal. And again, however little movement you got on this, that's totally fine. We just want to apply a little pressure through that stiff, painful, just jacked up muscle, and just use the breathing. Tie the breathing in with the movement to get the brain to relax, stop contracting that muscle so hard. Just calm this system down. Okay, so now when I do Finkelstein's test, it already feels a ton better on me. It's feeling kind of tight and a little bit painful as I get into end range. I still can get something slightly sensitive if I go all the way, but I want to now work with the voodoo band. We did our tack and stretch. Now we're gonna do forearm muscle flossing, again, of these extensor and abductor muscles of the thumb on the dorsal radial forearm here. So I'm just gonna hold on to one end of the floss band, and then I'm gonna wrap around. Now you wanna be careful, you don't wanna totally cut off your circulation. If your hand turns white, or if you feel any tingling in the hand or the wrist area, take the band off. You wrapped it too tight or put it on for too long. About 2 minutes max. And again, I'm not wrapping super tight here because this can be a really sensitive area, but I'm gonna overlap 50% of the previous wrap. Again, not too much tension, just a little bit, and then go all the way up to the elbow. Okay, and when I'm at the end, I'm just gonna kind of toss it around, grab it here, get a little wrap underneath that I can also easily pull out when I want to take it off. All right, very simple. I'm just working on opening up ulnar deviation, flexion, thumb coming across. All those movements combined, especially when I combine it with a little elbow extension there, or I can kind of do the reverse where I'm flexing the elbow, bringing that wrist, flexion, ulnar deviation, thumb coming across, and then extend and open up. So play around with including different elbow movements. Good to hit both ways. But I just want to spend as much time moving back and forth, really opening this up. I can get a little leverage here, sort of putting that dorsal part of the hand between the first and second metacarpals on the ground, just opening up a little extra range of motion there. Okay, ready to come off. Okay, you can see the color difference between my two hands. The blood has just rushed back into this side, so it's nice and pink. You can see it on the forearm side as well. But what we've done is sort of squeezed these muscles together, forced them to slide against each other, but also we've squeezed out a lot of extracellular fluid and cellular waste products and all kinds of stuff that's hanging around when you have these dysfunctional, painful tissues. But we've squeezed that out, and now we're getting a lot of fresh blood flow in, so that's gonna help even further with the healing process. And again, I'm feeling even better. I'm having a very hard time even finding any discomfort with that Finkelstein's test. If you're suffering from DQT, you're not gonna get complete resolution from this, but it's all about getting a little bit better. Okay, so we've done a little tack and stretch with a lacrosse ball. We did a little voodoo band. Now I'm gonna do a little gua sha. Like I said, you can use the back of a butter knife, but it's not that good, and you just have to be really careful. It's much better to have something thicker. So if you have these gua sha tools are awesome, but if you just have anything that's a little bit more of a dull surface, that's good. I've got some raw shea butter here. You could use coconut oil. You could use just a little, moisturizing lotion, whatever you like. But I'm just going to put a little bit of this over, especially these muscles that we've been working on. This extensor pollicis brevis up here, and then this abductor pollicis longus a little closer to the elbow, and I'm just gonna get a good bit of sort of moisturizer, lubricant, surface on there. And then I'm just going to very gently, I'm just using this curved surface that kind of matches the curve of my arm, very gently, just kind of scrape towards the elbow. I don't want to dig in here and gristle, I just want to be really gentle. And just sort of like you're, you know, dusting off a little dusty surface. I don't want to dig in here super hard, but you can just, as much as feels good. It should feel good, not at all like you're working through something painful. But I'm just holding onto my knee in a little bit of a stretched position for these muscles. That's a good way to do it. Obviously don't push past any pain, but just want to expose those muscles a little bit, and you can feel that's a little tender to work on, but it feels good. So I'm just being really gentle here. Probably fast forward the video here, but this is going to be extensor pollicis brevis, and then I can go up here and work on abductor pollicis longus as well. I got a little knot trigger point thing in here, so I'm just going to be gentle, just repeatedly going over it, scraping it up towards the elbow, just trying to get that to relax a little bit and feel smooth and not so gristly. Okay, so we did a little tack and stretch with lacrosse ball, we did the voodoo band, we did a little gua sha. You can really see the color difference side to side, just how much more ruddy and full of blood this forearm that I've been working on is, and that's the advantage of doing the voodoo and the gua sha stuff, just bringing a lot of nice blood flow, and that tissue is just going to feel much warmer now on this side than on this side. And warmer tissue is more extensible, it's more flexible. So after all that, let's recheck my range of motion. Much better now on this side into wrist flexion. You can see the difference side to side. And then ulnar deviation, I'll just do one at a time, boom and boom. So much more range of motion here on the right. And then Finkelstein's test feels pretty tight on this side, no problem at all on this side. So I've really freed up range of motion. Your mileage may vary in terms of how much progress you make, but keep at it over time. Even if it's 5% better after doing that, that's worth it, because that's extra range of motion that you can now load into. And loading, when you have a soft tissue injury, especially a tendinopathy or a tendonitis or a tenosynovitis, as DQT is all about progressive pain-free loading. So we have two muscles involved. One attaches to the distal phalanx of the thumb, one attaches to the first metacarpal. They both originate from this dorsal radius. So I want to just do a little bit. I'm gonna start with the first metacarpal, and I'm just gonna load it eccentrically, and that means that I'm pushing with my other hand. If you have bilateral, don't use your thumb, use your fingers. But I just want to push this thumb to move across the palm and load my wrist a little bit, but I'm not gonna push so hard that it hurts. If all I can do is just barely load it at all at first, that's fine. I'm gonna do that for anywhere from 15 to 100 repetitions, depending on when I start to feel tired and feel a little blood flow in there. Start off with just a few and then build each time you do it. Then you'll build the intensity or the load that you're able to resist as well, okay? Then we're just gonna do the same thing on that proximal phalanx of the thumb. I'm just fighting to keep it up and bringing it across. And then I can even load my wrist or just resist that wrist movement into ulnar deviation and flexion. But that is our loading strategy. And again, it's just no pain. We want to feel warm muscle effort and activity here with no pain in the tendons. And then we progress the amount of load and then the number of repetitions. When you're doing, say, like 3 sets of 50 with pretty good resistance, you will no longer have DQT and you'll have full functional capacity. You can see that's a quick way. We just did however many minutes it was. I'll have the number appear right here, of work and achieve major differences in range of motion and tolerance to load. So that's a simple recipe for dealing with DQT on your own. Give it a shot. Please leave a comment below. Let me know how this goes. Let me know what other conditions you want me to make videos like this for. Subscribe to the channel. Follow me on Twitter. We'll see you next time.